Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today, my guest is Liam Spillane, Head of Emerging Markets Debt at Aviva Investors. Welcome, Liam.
Hello.
Liam, today we want to discuss recent trends and developments around ESG in Asian investing. So Asia lags behind Western countries in terms of integrating ESG factors, but is catching up quickly. What is currently driving the demand for Asian ESG strategies?
I think there are a few factors driving that demand. One, I think, is a real growing understanding of how ESG can affect asset prices. I think much of the fund management and investor community is growing their knowledge in that context. And obviously alongside that, the second factor would be the kind of growth in the ESG dedicated strategies that are commensurate with that growing knowledge as well. And I suppose the third quite important point in Europe, at least so far, has been the increased regulatory focus on ESG and ESG strategies. So I think there are a few factors driving that demand, and we'd expect that demand to continue in that respect.
To what extent has COVID-19 influenced a shift in thinking toward ESG as an investment topic?
A really good question, and particularly for investors such as ourselves, something that's really at the front of our minds. I would say that COVID-19 has encouraged ESG along the journey that it was already on. When we think about that, we're thinking about the increased focus on social factors that has really become apparent in many countries around the world. Sadly, for negative reasons, this is a health crisis and a social crisis. So the S in ESG has become increasingly important. But governance has always been very important, particularly in the sovereign space. So I think a real encouragement or an evolution of ESG importance and focus, COVID has really helped encourage that development. And certainly one additional factor to really highlight is obviously to fund the COVID response across the world. There has been a very significant issuance of debt. So investors such as ourselves that are investing in countries that are issuing debt are certainly more mindful of ESG metrics, as are the issuers as well. So a real evolution of the progress and focus on ESG that was already in place, and certainly becoming more prominent in social factors as well as governance, as well as environmental.
How is data and information on ESG factors available in Asia in comparison to Europe, for example?
We see data availability in Asia as very much similar to other regions in the world. There are certainly challenges with obtaining and processing or analyzing ESG data. And one of the biggest challenges that is faced globally, not just in Asia, is the fact that ESG data is very backward looking and very often very slow to be updated. So some of the metrics that we analyze are only updated maybe once every year or once every 18 months. So that is a problem that is faced globally, not just in Asia. We find that one way to help manage that problem is really to overlay a subjective forward-looking analysis on top of the data that is available to give a much more rounded opinion of ESG that gives a forward-looking bias as well as a historical-looking bias that you can get from data that is readily available.
How do you evaluate countries like China against ESG criteria, so especially when it comes to environmental but also social factors?
Yeah, from our perspective, China scores relatively low compared to the universe, to the broader EMD universe specifically. And certainly there are aspects of that historical looking data that represent some level of concern. But overlaying a forward-looking subjective analysis or qualitative analysis, I think is very important, and particularly for a country like China. And there are certainly signs of improvement in some of those underlying metrics. And there's also been a very strong commitment from China to evolving their impact on climate, for example, And certainly a lot of resource has been applied to that commitment as well. So again, I think it's very important to have a historical looking perspective where China perhaps doesn't score as well as other countries, but also overlay that with a qualitative forward-looking approach. And that suggests room for improvement. And it also suggests that there has been improvement in recent times in that respect.
To what extent do ESG factors play a role in setting up and managing your Asian portfolios currently?
ESG forms an integral part of our kind of fundamental assessment for sovereign issuers as well as corporate issuers. So certainly plays a key role in managing our Asian portfolios. I think it's important to talk about how we actually implement that integration. So historical backward-looking indicators will only take you so far in terms of assessing issuers, whether that's from a sovereign perspective or a corporate perspective. And certainly there are real merits to using an historical quantitative approach in that respect. But again, re-emphasizing the point of the importance of a forward-looking qualitative approach is really fundamental to the way that we approach ESG integration for the Asian part of our portfolios, but also global portfolios as well. So it's a very, very important aspect of how we manage our Asian portfolios, but equally as important is how we do that. And as I say, that balanced approach between quantitative data and forward-looking qualitative assessment is very important.
How can international investors benefit from the increased awareness for ESG factors in portfolio management?
International investors will continue to benefit from the focus on ESG, not just globally, but particularly in Asia as well. As has been well documented, there have been significant improvements made across the globe. Europe has been somewhat at the forefront of ESG integration. Certainly, we can recognize that in other regions, Asia, but as well as America as well, that integration is evolving and being more deeply integrated within portfolios across Asia. So I think international investors can really benefit from an acceleration in the Asian integration of ESG that has, to a good degree, has already happened in Europe, but we expect that to catch up very much in Asia and also America as well, as investors become more demanding of fund managers and are looking for ESG integration to be more present in their portfolios.
So this was Liam Spillane, Head of Emerging Markets Debt at Aviva Investors. Thank you very much, Liam, for being with us today and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. Very nice to talk to you.